Technology is the most powerful change in the world of education.
Everything changes.
Welcome to the Emerging Technologies in Education podcast, delivered to you by Clever Books Company. Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining this podcast, Emerging Technologies in Education. We are continuing. We have a brilliant speaker today, and I want you to introduce you to Sonny. Sonny, giving you the word, tell us about yourself, which country you are from, and what do you do in life?
Well, thank you very much, Tara. It's a pleasure to be on here. My name is Dr. Anthony Joseph Magana III, which is a mouthful, so I prefer people call me by my nickname, which is Sonny Magana. And I am an educator. I've been a teacher for over 30 years. I've been a principal, technology director. I led various state-level technology initiatives. And for a long time, I've been researching the question, how does technology add value directly in terms of instructional quality or increasing student learning productivity in ways that cannot be done without the technology? Over the past several years, I've been devoted to compiling the research that I've been engaged in over the past 30 years. And so now I'm writing books to synthesize my findings. And so you can consider myself now an educational futurist, because in my work at Magana Education, which is a little firm I've studied, my focus is on imagining the future of education.
This is brilliant. Thank you a lot for introduction. You have amazing experience and amazing things to share. That's brilliant. So then I want to tell you, of course, as this is the question of our podcast, are you positive or negative in regards to technology in education, and why?
It's a great question. I'll answer that question by explaining some things that are confounding for other people about their perspective on technology. And this is it. Some people have a bias, a value negative bias about technology in education, and feel that technology in education is actually driving good instruction backwards. It's actually hurting student achievement. And these folks are interpreting recent studies. The OECD came out with a study that was correlational that showed that students that spend more time online or in front of computers actually did less well on the PISA examinations. The people are reading the work by Larry Cuban, who's an esteemed professor emeritus from Stanford University, and his take on technology is that it's really not shown to have much benefit at all. So some people harbor a value negative bias towards technology, and that actually skews reality. On the other hand, some people have a value positive bias towards technology, and just think, if you bring technology into educational situations, learning will automatically be transformed. That it will automatically, when adding digital tools, have a positive impact on student learning. Neither are true. Neither really reflect the data. Neither really reflect what the evidence basis says. And so my position, and the position that I encourage all your listeners and anybody I speak to take, is to take a value neutral perspective on technology. And first of all, recognize what their bias tends to be. You can just ask some simple questions. When you're faced with using a new technology in your classroom, are your feelings skewed towards a positive valence, like you're excited, you have high hopes, you're optimistic? Are they scaled towards a negative valence, that you get grumpy, you get frustrated, you get angry? And then just determine, based on a simple self-assessment, what is your current bias about new and emerging technologies? And what I suggest is to take a neutral perspective. Technology in and of itself has no inherent value. I want to say that again, it's such an important point. Technology in and of itself, in learning situations, it has no inherent value. It's inert. It doesn't do anything by itself. It just sits there. The value is made manifest in the manner in which it's used. So my perspective is I have a neutral perspective. The technology can add value if it's used properly, if it's used to enhance highly reliable instructional strategies. If it's just used to replace a teacher, it does actually hurt student achievement. So my position is take the middle of the road. It's how you use it, not if you use it.
This is a brilliant point. Like, absolutely love it. It's neutral, and it's like every event in your life. It's neutral, and you color it either positive or negative. And the same about technology. It's a tool that you can use in the way you want, if you want to, and you can get benefits of it if you use it properly. That's absolutely great. So, and can you tell me then, like I know about your work on technology, disruptive technologies in education. So maybe we touched the point a little bit on how which technology could be a good supplement for the education in the classroom or in school in general, and why, in your opinion. And can you elaborate a little bit more about your book?
I'd be delighted to. Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind comments. You know, I use this analogy to explain to people, you know, how to take a value neutral position. I'm a musician, as well as what I am is really a fission, musician, academician. I'm a
Wow.
musician, I'm a fisherman, and I'm also an academician. And I tell people, look, I have this wonderful Fender Stratocaster guitar that I just love playing. And I hook it up to an amplifier, a nice Fender Deluxe Reverb tube model. If I bought a more expensive, more powerful amplifier, but didn't change the way I played, if I were a lousy guitarist, I would still be a lousy guitarist. I would just be louder at it. So that's a good analogy to think about technology. It just amplifies your practice. If you don't fundamentally change your practices, the technology will only amplify whatever practices you happen to be engaging in at the time. If I'm a lousy guitar player and I get a better amp, the amp is not going to make me a better guitar player. So we need to think about what exactly is our intention in a learning environment and how technology intentionally will add value. Now, that's a really important guiding question that I want educators around the world to ask themselves, because the research, and by the way, I should say there are 5 levels of research, Daria. 5 levels of research that
Wow.
people also need to wrap their heads around. The first level, that I call level 1, is personal experience. And that's like personal opinion. We have experience and we build our opinions from our personal experience. That's level 1. Level 2 is collective experience, when you have 2 or more people experiencing something, and then you have a collective opinion. Neither one of those is really a valid foundation to make any kind of predictions, because the sample size is very small. At a level 1, the sample size is generally 1. So the opinions that humans offer is generally derived from a sample size of 1. So it's not very generalizable. It might work for you, but it may not work for anyone else or in any other condition or in any other population. Level 3 is systematic observation, scientific observation, and this using the social sciences methodologies, either experimental or quasi-experimental studies, to determine relationships between variables. And that way you try to mitigate for errors like bias or the influence of random events or other human errors. Science is the only way we can make sense of the world around us. And so we really need to hazard the trials of science in order to win our prize of understanding relationships between variables. So that's level 3, is scientific observation. Level 4 is when you have 2 or more experiments that suggest the same relationship between variables. Usually, that's what we call compounding evidence. We have several studies that suggest the same outcome over a period of time, or with different populations or in different locations. That's a much stronger foundation upon which to make predictions or conjecture about how something might work. And then there's level 5, which is the preponderance of evidence. And that's when you have thousands and thousands of studies that are distilled to determine the relationship between variables. In this case, the variables will be technology use and student achievement, for example.
Mm-hmm.
All the work in my book, Disruptive Classroom Technology, are based on level 4 and level 5 evidence, compounding evidence or the preponderance of evidence that demonstrates the effectiveness of how to use technology in education. So we need to be aware of that. If we argue from a level 1 position against level 5 evidence, it doesn't really make sense, right? It's like you're arguing from a much weaker position, and so your argument doesn't really hold as much water. The evidence that underpins the strategies, disruptive classroom technologies, are very well researched and are supported by either compounding or preponderance of evidence. Now, having said that, let me explain what my evidence finds, what it shows. If we use technology to replace teachers, in other words, we use technology as a direct replacement to teachers, and that's a type of technology that's called computer-assisted instruction. The effect is very small to small, very small to small. If we use technology to supplement what teachers do, their instructional practices are supplemented by technologies, the effect size is moderate. But if we use technologies to enhance highly reliable instructional strategies that themselves are supported by either compounding or the preponderance of evidence, add technology to enhance those strategies, and the effects become large to exceedingly large. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is indeed, and I absolutely like this approach. Like enhancing is one of the strongest points, I think. And my point of view personally is that technology should be used actually to enhance the learning process and the capabilities of the teacher to deliver as well.
Yeah, it should be. That should be the word that we use, to enhance instruction and learning strategies. But the way that technology is used most predominantly is to replace or supplement. To replace or supplement. So the work that I cite most often is by the brilliant New Zealand educational researcher who has really done arguably some of the most cutting edge research methodology. His name is Professor John Hattie. He's at the University of Melbourne. And he studies many studies. He does a technique called meta-analyses, where he analyzes multiple analyses. So he works at the level 5, preponderance of evidence. And after studying over 10,000 studies on various aspects of computers and education, Dr. Hattie found that the average impact, if we were to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, for example, the average impact of technology is about a 3. The impact of technology on student achievement, average, after analyzing over 10,000 studies, is 3 out of 10. That may be surprising to people, but that's what the research says.
This is interesting.
It's fascinating, yeah. Here's what makes it even more staggering, is that effect of a 3 out of 10 has not changed in over 50 years.
Wow. That's impressive. By the way, I actually, like, we're talking about technology and education, about the teachers doing something, not doing. I was recently talking to one of the guests on the podcast, and he actually said that they've done the research. They're trying to enter India with their technology and that they provide in the UK. And he said that there is a trend in India that teachers actually do not show up at the class. And kids have nothing else to do but go online and learn themselves. What do you think on that?
Well, I think if we look at what the research says and we use the research as a foundation upon which to draw some considered conclusions, we can say that when kids use technologies in the absence of a teacher guide, the effect will be about, the effect size is statistical analysis, 0.34. That's why I'm adjusting it to a scale of 1 to 10. The effect is going to be about a 3. The teacher is an essential component in any learning conversation. And there's no research that comes close to refuting Dr. Hattie's research. So when left to their own devices, the preponderance of research shows that student use of technology tends to be banal and trivial. So the notion that students can teach themselves biochemistry, or students can teach themselves the English language, is not supported by the evidence. However, when teachers are present either virtually or in face-to-face to support students with clear learning intentions, clear opportunities to monitor and track their progress, and multiple ways for students to express and represent their new knowledge gain using digital tools, the effect of that is exceedingly high.
Do agree with you on this point, but if we're talking about, for example, e-libraries, like reading books, do you think there is
Yeah.
like a also needed a teacher guidance for that, like which books to select? But it's pretty much same like going to the normal library then, or what's your
Yeah.
opinion on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. There's an educator, it's actually a researcher, to call him an educator is a bit of a stretch. There's research in the United States that created a very popular opinion paper that's underpinned by absolutely zero research, maybe a level 1, maybe personal experience. His name is Mark Prensky, and he wrote a paper called Digital Natives, Digital Immigrants. And in it, he describes that students, when left to their own devices, will learn extraordinary things, and the teachers just need to get out of the way by using digital resources that are consumed online. The reality, and John Hattie actually wrote about this in his wonderful book, Visible Learning for Teachers, does not support that over-optimistic hyperbole. When left to their own devices, student use of technology is actually quite trivial. So Prensky ascribes to students characteristics they simply do not possess. Students need guidance. They need scaffolds. Those scaffolds are best represented as an adult teacher, a more knowledgeable human guiding their tenuous experiences with first interacting with new knowledge, then acquiring that new knowledge, then deepening that new knowledge, and then transferring that new knowledge into new contexts. That absolutely requires the use of a more knowledgeable teacher and coach as a guide. You know, I mean, for example, imagine, can you just if you throw a soccer ball out in the middle of a village somewhere, do you think those students would be, those learners, those soccer players, without a coach, without any guidance, would be able to play at Premier League level? Of
I
course not. It's
don't think so, yeah.
it's a ridiculous supposition. Yet we think the same thing of students, which actually diminishes the critical value of the teacher as guide and a facilitator for student knowledge. So these opinions that people harbor, that all you need to do is add technology and wonderful things will happen, is simply just not borne up by the evidence.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. What do you think on like the emerging technologies, or like we call it disruptive, emerging, whatever word you choose, like 3D printing, like virtual reality, like augmented reality in the classroom? Is there any real practical application to that?
Absolutely. And there are practical and really powerful applications for existing technologies, not just emerging technologies. The key is how you use it. Over the 30 years that I've been researching, I started researching this in 1984, actually, which is a prophetic year. In fact, I'm writing a piece about it called 1984 2.0, because
Wow.
Orwell matters.
Oh my God,
So
that's a long way.
I know, it's a long time. I was very young at the time, I have to say, in my own defense. I was a young graduate student and studying the impact of technology on student achievement and engagement in 1984. And so I've synthesized all that research and into a framework, but it's not a technology integration framework. It's a framework for innovation. I
Okay.
call it the T3 framework for innovation. Here's why. We've had technology integration frameworks, guides, standards for the last 35 years. And the impact it has had on student achievement is 0.34, a 3 out of 10. 3 out of 10. What we have developed, unfortunately, with great expense and tremendous expenditure of energy and effort, well intended. These are good people doing good things, or actually good people doing things for the right reasons. But we've created learning environments that are technologically rich, but innovatively poor.
Wow.
Technologically rich, but innovatively poor learning environments will not move the needle of technology impact forward. We need to have a way to codify and organize and create strategies for teachers to start to embed innovative teaching and learning practices. That's how we'll see the needle of technology impact moving forward. And that's why I developed the T3 framework for innovation. The T3 stands for 3 different stages or categories of technology use: translational technology use, transformational technology use, and what I call transcendent technology use. Translational, transformational, and transcendent. Now, if I may, I'll briefly explain each stage because it'll directly relate to your question about
Go
emerging
ahead.
technology, how
Go
we use
ahead.
it. All right. In translational technology use, we simply do the same old things that we used to do in an analog fashion, but now we use technologies to automate those processes. Now, that does add value, but it adds value in terms of efficiency, time saving, and reduction in errors. The most popular uses of technology in education are email, electronic testing, and internet searches. So in the translational domain of technologies, I have 2 elements. One is called automation, where the task isn't substantively changed. It's just you just can do it more quickly with digital tools. Or consumption, and that's where teachers and students consume knowledge and content information from a digital source as opposed to an analog source. Instead of reading a book or a magazine or encyclopedia, you go onto Wikipedia, or you do internet searches, or you read an e-book or an e-textbook, and you consume information electronically. That adds some value, but it's relatively small. That's how we've been using technology for the past 30 years, is either to automate administrative tasks like budgeting or record keeping or grading or reporting, and consumption of information. Now, for the teachers that are listening, I'll just think for a moment, what of your practices currently would you characterize as translational in the subdomains of automation or consumption? Now, that's important. I mean, we need to do that, but we mustn't stop there. We mustn't stop there. In order to get better, we have to go through another stage, which I call transformational technologies. I define transformational uses of technology as the kind of use of educational tools in learning spaces where the task is substantively changed by the use of technology, and the student doing the task is also substantively changed by using the technology tools. They have more knowledge, they have greater consciousness or greater cognizance. They can now understand a concept, model it, and communicate it in ways that they couldn't before. There's 2 stages in the transformational technologies that I call elements. One is production, and the other is contribution. In the production stage, students produce their own mastery goals. They produce their own ways of setting academic objectives with intentionality, then track and monitor their progress using a scale I call the Magana proficiency scale, the Magana mastery scale. 3, 2, or 1. If there are 3, they've mastered the subject, they've mastered the concept, they can communicate it appropriately, they can model it without any errors. And they continue to set more goals. And in the process, they become better at self-regulating the amount of effort they need to achieve mastery in whatever the learning goal is. And then they also produce, in addition to those clear learning intentions for themselves, they produce representations of their understanding, digital knowledge and thought artifacts that represent what the child knows, what the child can do, and more importantly, how they think about it. Using digital tools, kids can make their thinking pathways explicit to their teachers, to their classmates, and to themselves. And that's really powerful because then students can engage in a kind of cumulative review of their own thinking. And that's highly motivating. When we see our own growth and we see our own knowledge gain, that's inherently motivating. And it helps us, it encourages us to invest more effort in our academic pursuits so that we can achieve higher and higher levels. That's really powerful. The next level in transformational technologies I call contribution. And that's when, in addition to making those learning artifacts that students use to represent their knowledge, they do it in a way to specifically teach someone what they now know. Kids teaching other kids is one of the most extraordinary things that I've seen in the 30 years that I've been studying this effective technology in education, where kids use open-ended productivity tools like the Google suite of tools, or any suite of open-ended productivity tools, or screencast tools that like Screencastify or Screencast-O-Matic or Jing, or a whole host of recording tools that allow students to make multimedia recordings. Kids can now create their own tutorials to teach someone else what they know. And in the process of teaching someone what they know, they're going to deepen it and consolidate their deep understanding of that knowledge by transferring that knowledge in the process of creating a tutorial. It's a fabulous thing. And the impact of those strategies is exceedingly high. Pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, totally agree with you. It's not only about keys. Like when you're teaching somebody something, what you know, you actually learn even a lot more because you're trying to investigate the subject and how to deliver it and things like this. And I think it's absolutely important that kids have those opportunities to teach somebody else how they do things.
Absolutely. In John Hattie and Donahue's wonderful model, they have a learning model of 3 different stages of learning: surface learning, deeper learning, and knowledge transfer. In our current modern state of education, we tend to privilege surface learning and practicing that learning. It's what Hattie calls the tell and practice model of teaching. Teachers tell kids what's important, they tell them what to memorize, then kids go and practice it and memorize it and regurgitate that information on some type of formative or summative assessment. Now, the tell and practice model may have served us well in the industrial or post-industrial age, but in the conceptual age, where conceptual understanding and the ability to transfer that knowledge to do something meaningful, like solve a unique problem or use that knowledge in some meaningful way, really needs to come to the forefront. So as you're describing, not just kids, but anybody teaching someone what they now know, what they're actually doing is transferring that knowledge. They're using that knowledge to transfer it and in a new context, which is not to learn it, but to teach it. And that is transformational. The learner now transforms from student to teacher. And it's that transfer of knowledge that consolidates deep understanding so that the person is now substantively changed. Once I teach something, it's now a part of me. It's a part of who I am. And I will never see problems that I struggled with in the past in quite the same way. I'm changed. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come back a little bit to teachers and think of their concerns and why would they, kind of not decline or reject, but maybe be cautious about using technology in the classroom.
Well, I think teachers have been using technology to support a tell and practice model of instruction. And the effect, as I mentioned before, is about a 3 out of 10. So it's quite understandable. I don't think the teachers are necessarily gun shy. I think they're exhausted. I think they're exhausted. And I speak to principals and technology directors who are spending a lot of energy and not seeing any benefit from the use of technology. And it's natural to sympathize with them because they're just they're working so hard in the noblest profession. Teaching is the noblest profession there is. But when we just use technology to supplement the tell and practice model, you're not going to get much bang for the buck. The strategies that I've articulated in my book have an effect size of 1.6 that was observed by Marzano and Hasted. And in my scale of 1 to 10, that's not a 3, that's a 16. That's an extremely large effect size. It's equivalent to 3, 4, or more years of gain in a single year. 3 or 4 additional years in a single academic year. Certainly that's something we need to pay attention to. We also need to pay attention to the final stage that I call Transcendent Technologies. And that's something we need to aspire to. We need to have learning systems aspire to having students use technologies in such a way that go well above and beyond the original expectations and limitations for which their organized educational system was designed. And the 2 stages that I've defined are inquiry design and social entrepreneurship, where students use technologies to investigate wicked problems that matter to them. And I suggest using the global goals, the sustainable goals for development. The United Nations adopted these 17 domains of wicked problems, from gender inequality to ending poverty to climate change to life on Earth, life under the water. There's these 17 domains of wicked problems. And we should ask kids, what wicked problem matters to you? And then show them the specific steps to engage in an inquiry design process, and then use digital tools like 3D printers or new coding environments or app building tools to have kids explore the process of generating authentic, original, more robust digital solutions as means to solve those wicked problems that matter to them. See, we've been asking kids the wrong question for years. We ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? What job do you want? That's a question that has no benefit anymore. We should stop asking that question and start asking kids, what wicked problem matters to you, and what are you going to do about it? And when we get whole systems engaging students in inquiry design and social entrepreneurship, the whole system changes. Students' passion for making the world a better place, for improving the world, and having kids see that their educational growth is a means to an end, not an end to itself, but a means to making the world a better place, that passion becomes lit, and that light will never go out. That's my vision for the future of education, where students are active inquirers, investigating wicked problems that matter to them, and harnessing the power of new and emerging digital tools by creating new digital tools, new environments, new platforms, new apps as a means to solve the wicked problems that matter to them and ultimately to life on the planet.
This is really great points, and I totally appreciate your thoughts. I think they are brilliant. And if possible, I would like to share the information about your book where people can get it. Sure. In the description to this podcast, or any other resources that you can advise, because I see you like absolutely knowledgeable from that, research and pedagogical point of view, and also in the methodology how to apply the technology in education and how what is the best approach to it. So really appreciate, and thank you so much for all the information shared and your time today.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you very much for your kind invitation and for graciously hosting me on the show. I'd be more than happy to send you information where folks can get information about me. My website is maganaeducation.com. The book is Disruptive Classroom Technologies, a framework for innovation in education, and it's available online at amazon.com or corwinpress.com or barnesandnoble.com. And I'll send you that information there.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much again, and have a brilliant evening.
And you as well.
Everything changes.